Hello and welcome to a DM's Travel Book Club, a guide to the planes, where each episode we explore a new plane of existence as outlined in the Great Wheel Cosmology as found in the role-playing game Dungeons and Dragons. With me this week
Oh my
is
god!
Fiona. Don't ruin it! I did
We
it in
got
one
that.
take, no checks.
We got it! Excellent. That's all I want for the trailer. Like,
Anyway, with me as always is the wonderful, the magnificent Fiona. How are you?
hello. I am doing very well. We're not filming late at night. It's actually quite nice and sunny
Yes.
where I am.
You can't tell in my room because it's always got the curtains closed. And
You're
the lights
you're
on.
always you're always like studio perfect, and you see me going through different stages of like, I had a good day, I had a bad day,
But it is
so-
daytime. It is daytime.
Daytime. Yes,
So maybe we'll be more buzzy, or maybe we'll be less buzzy. We will see, because you don't get that sort of like tired loopiness that you get.
Oh yeah, so you might actually get content.
Yeah, exactly.
What
You might
you're
actually get
saying.
like actual content.
But yeah, no, I'm doing very well. How are you doing, Hamilton? All good with you?
I'm doing good. Yes, I'm Hamilton. If this
well
is
done.
going out audio as well, but yes, no. Yeah, I'm doing good. I had, as I said to you earlier, had a session 0 for my piratey game, so I'm all very excited
Yay.
about that. So yes, and I had some exciting news that I can't share, but I'm very excited about. Just
Very
saying as
excited
well.
about just before
So,
we went live, some exciting
yeah.
news, and we're like both like, ooh, very exciting.
So yeah, it's all very
Absolutely.
exciting.
So-
Fiona.
Yes, so exciting that
Yeah.
we're going to not one but two paradises. There you go.
are. Exactly. The pastoral splendor of Bytopia we are in. It has 2 layers, and it is basically the home of most of the Gnomish pantheon, which we'll find out about.
Yay!
It's a very interesting. I enjoyed it. Have you enjoyed it? You very said you very much enjoyed reading
I did enjoy it. I think, to be fair, as a slight behind the scenes stuff, so on our sibling podcast, DM's Book Club, there is an episode dedicated to gnomes and halflings from Mordecai's Tome of Foes. And whilst we don't go necessarily into lots of deep detail about the gnomish pantheon and stuff like that, I highly recommend, if you're still able to look at the books, obviously I know it's now legacy content, the gnomish pantheon and just everything about gnomes, it's just really interesting. And for me, they've always had a soft spot in my heart, and reading them in comparison to halflings is really, really fascinating. So I'd actually recommend that if you wanted something a little bit different, try reading that and then look at Bytopia stuff, because obviously, as you said, this is the home of the gnomish deities, essentially.
Yeah.
So I feel like I had a bit more into
really,
it.
and one who
we
who
don't
lives
We
in and
don't
about.
talk about that one. It's like we don't talk about Bruno. We don't talk about Erdel. But yes, no, I really liked this one, and I liked how it's described. Like, again, for me, this was one of the easier planes to actually visualize, because it's like a sandwich, which I quite like. This idea that the 2 planes, it's like you got one above the sky and the one below, and it's almost like a mirror image, like there's a mirror in between, and it's reflected.
It's
above.
actually quite cool. Yeah, it is. It's a very simple, but it's a concept. Like all of them always have a good concept, but this is a great simplified concept of 2 layers of a plane, like upside, like as you said, there's a mirror in the middle, but they are slightly different in their tones. So, well, maybe we go on to that then. But, well, let's talk about the overall like ideology behind it. So it is a good plane. It is a neutral, as all of them of these planes conflict are. It's neutral, but it is it's not pure neutral good. It's like neutral good.
neutral good, yeah,
with
absolutely.
a hint of exactly. It is the home to hard work, basically. I think that's the best way to put it.
Hooray!
It's the good of a it's a good of the good feeling of a good day's labor, doing something that you love to do. I think that it makes the point that people who work on this, that everyone who does a job here, they do the job that they wish to do. So it's a labor of love as much as work. So it's no job is like a hardship in the sense of like, oh, I don't want to do this. It's people who come to this plane their jobs that they're doing are the ones that they've wanted to do. It's like if we were on said a plane, we'd be making content like podcasts or playing Dungeons and Dragons.
We'd be making content, but also you missed out the key thing was that once it's done, that they do want to get a good value for it. So whilst work ethic is strong, they also like a good value for money, good value for their work. You know,
Exactly.
But Yeah, but I agree. In my head, how I see this, because it's painted very pastorally. This idea of like, home crafts. I instantly got, and I appreciate this. It's a very UK niche reference. I know we do them all the time. But Hamilton, have you ever been to or heard of a place called Beamish at all in the UK?
Beamish? No.
Beamish, yeah, Beamish. It is a living museum in Yorkshire where it's basically this huge town, and it goes from like the 1890s all the way up to sort of early 1920s, and you have these things of like, here are the trams, here are people working and all that sort of thing, and it's just like a living recreational thing. Then you have them in the US quite a bit as well, but it's fascinating because obviously they have all this stuff, and they do like crafts there. There's a sweet shop there where they make all the sweets from scratch, and it's very fascinating to be there as a time traveler tourist or whatever. And that's how I imagine it, is that everyone's working, everyone's like, hello, it's all very lovely and local. But actually, I feel like this is more how the way Bytopia is presented to me. I actually got these images of how businesses nowadays like to think we do. Like, haha, you love to work here. Oh, excellent. Yes, hang in there. All these sort of like mottos and like, I love working for business. That's how I actually see it, rather than this pastoral thing, which is like, here's an idealized concept. But I feel like it's something that businesses nowadays really want to get into. Like, this is what happy workers are, hard working workers, all that sort of jazz.
No, I'm with you on that. I think that's the thing, and it is as it says in the thing. This is not the bergs are not crowded or polluted. No huge mechanized like gearworks block out the sky. Tall towers don't billow forth clouds of noxious smoke, and factories don't dump poison into the streams. Bytopia remains as pristine as its crafters, artisans, and simple folk who work hard in quiet rural settings throughout the plain. And I think so. You're right. It is that sort of idealized Hovis advert sounding, rolling
absolutely.
hills and people, it's that simple, the simple life or whatever people used to, the good life sort of ideal, isn't it? Of you do an honest, very non-polluting, working like mindfulness sort of things, like making joinery, doing some trade works that are just like about making craft, so you can imagine beautiful sculptures and like
woodwork and all, and knitting and
gemstones. They make beautiful jewelry, so it's lots of like fantastic things like that, as well as but there are two layers to it, as we said, and one is actually slightly more physical work, whilst the other is much more craft work. Sorry, I'm just thinking of craft work now, but I think but if we stick with the work theme, as it does say, every cutter does only what he or she loves to do. The philosophy extends to everything, including work. So the goods here produced are both a business and a labour of love. As a result, the work ethic is very strong. So folks who don't share this ethic are treated coolly, it says. No one's going to be treated badly, but it's very much, and so adventurers especially are considered wastrels and lazy sods who wander around without producing anything of substance.
I think the quote that I pulled out was, Bytopians don't extend credit, which I love, because that happens in every single part of the year. Well, I've got 20 gold now, I could pay you 20 gold, and you're just like, no. it's 40 gold.
It's 20 gold, but you can wash the dishes and mow the fields and do some labouring, to help. Like, you work for your keep, as they say, if you don't have the coin. Yeah,
exactly. So and sort of it gets that thing like production and making stuff is wonderful, but is wasted without the business of trade. And I think this feels very different. This theme feels very different compared to all the other planes we go to, because I don't think realistically how much of our D&D campaigns revolve around shopping and trade and stuff. You should have one shopping episode, and it takes forever. But actually having a whole plane dedicated to this kind of thing, because this is like I wouldn't say the outlet mall, because that's not what it is, but this is the shopping centre to get all the best goods, right? So
it is where all the trades, the people come to trade with goods, get goods, and they are the best goods on the plane. So this is where all your top quality, like non-weapon, I clarify, because it's definitely not weaponized. It's all very artistic and craft based.
Artisan stuff. But like any good big shopping mall, it's really bloody hard to get to, because there's no big paths there. There's nothing. It's like off the beaten path. So like if you've been to the Trafford Centre, if you've been to Westfield, it's slightly out of town, so you have to
Yeah.
make your way there, like in the travel caravan and all that sort of thing. Which I was like, that's so
No,
true to life.
it is true, because like unlike a lot of the other places that are touched by the Great Pass as they're known, so that because it's in the good the sort of upper plains, there's obviously Yggdrasil or Oceanus that can touch these things. You can only get to Bytopia through the trade gate or through a portal, so it like makes you work for it
To even get there, yeah, absolutely,
to get there.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But it says for every centre, but to give it, it's not again. But then with this, it is still very agrarian, very pastoral. So it is 3 times the amount of area of wilderness for every commercial centre. So you've got to trade to get. So again, you've got to work to get between places. But it is still again just clarifying that point of which it did make me think. Like I'm sure they are missing a trick with a plane that is maybe like its evil counterpart, which I don't think they've really done. Which is the sort of like. Do you know what I mean? There isn't one that's very much like the sort of the what's the word I'm looking for? The capitalist extreme.
Business.
Do you know what I mean? The sort of like evil capitalist. Everything is like polluted and it's just like people working consistently, and it could be there could be a very good allegory for the capitalist societies that we live in.
I feel like it could be either of the 2 planes we've got left. So obviously we've got the Grey Waste or Gehenna, or if you're looking around for a plane that's like that and you can't find it, you're actually already on that plane.
That's it. It's the material plane. Sure.
We knew it this whole time. Oh my god, the real world.
Exactly. That's it. Exactly. So maybe, but I think there's also like, if you can always make your own planes, but I think there's also, as we're learning, there's a lot of things, and there's something that happens in this that we'll talk about, where there are planes that are being stolen by other planes, and you could have a part of Mechanis that's stolen a bit of Bytopia, made it too lawful, and therefore made it so regulatory, and therefore like you could have a really like overly complex, I don't know, fiscal based system.
As stocks and shares and there's a bell ringing at the morning when they've opened the business stock exchange.
And you could see one that's been taken over by a more evil side that's like a part of Bytopia that's like a plane, like a demi-plane of Bator or something that's sort of, or Gehenna, that's sort of this very capitalist society, and you could have fun with those, I think, which is interesting.
No, I think that's great. Speaking of though, like you said, so the 2 different planes, obviously you've got the more pastoral one, which is like you said, the more sort of refined. They've already got the raw materials, but then the other plane, I always assumed the one above, but it might not be the case because they are mirror images. Like you said, that's more rougher, and that's like getting the raw materials. That's like the gemstones, the steel, the iron. And you might wonder, I guess, how do you get from one plane to the other?
Yes.
So Hamilton, I'm going to ask you, how do you get
to one plane to the other? Well, there are multiple ways you can get from one plane to the other. Let's go from the simplest to the funnest, all right? So the easiest one is like so the planes are arranged, we said, like on top of each other. But where mountains rise up to meet, another mountain comes down, and some of them are so tall that they meet over that mirror plane, and so that the mountains connect. So you walk up, and one of them has been the greatest one. I forget the name of it, what the actual mountain itself is called.
Center Spire, I believe it's called. Center Spire.
Center Spire, thank you. Center Spire has been routed out on the edges with a spiral staircase that goes all the way up to the point and then all the way down. However, it's worth noting that where that transition is, you have to change gravity, and so everyone has to make dex checks and stuff like that for all those sort of fun ideas. But so that's one way. The other way is you find yourself a portal between the 2 layers. There are those. They are heavily guarded and run, and there is like a toll bridge. You have to pay the toll to go through.
Tariffs.
And stuff like that. Like there's a shortcut in Bath, which is there's a toll bridge in Bath, which is like run by a private family still. They've been running it for like hundreds of years, I think. But it's a good little shortcut. But yeah, you have to pay the toll to go across. Or the last but definitely not the least, the most fun is they have made hot air balloons. So like balloon sacks that are made from fabric and cloth and or like hides even, I think they say, where they fill them with hot air and they hold up tin or wooden containers that then float up using the hot air like a hot air balloon. And by the time they get to the halfway point, they've obviously figured out the mathematics of it to make the heat. By the time it gets up, it cools as it rises. And so it basically gets to that midpoint, and then it flips gravity, and then it's cooled enough that then it starts to fall down the other side.
Yeah.
It's just
Brilliant.
amazing. It's so good.
That I thought that was very cool, and I guess it's such a different view of traveling by air and balloon compared to Carceria, which was always like skin balloons, and you're like, ugh.
Yeah.
Here it's like we just not use normal balloons.
Yeah, fabric and cloth balloons.
Fabric balloons. But yeah, it's,
Yeah.
and that'll be a really cool thing to describe to your players when they arrive, as like they see this transportation method of the stuff, like loads of balloons. I guess like in like the Bristol air show, the idea that they sort of go and then switch over, and
Literally
like,
yesterday I was
places.
in my garden and I was just we like got home. I had just gone to bed. It was still sunny. Sat outside, had a little like glass of wine and stuff. And suddenly I heard like this. I was like, fucking hell! And it was literally only like 100 foot up. It was not because we live up slightly up the hill as well. And so I was like, holy shit balls! What is this thing? It's massive. I was like, hello. You can actually see the people. So it's kind of
That's
quite
very
experience.
cool. That's so cool.
But yes,
But
that
I guess
is how you travel.
Yeah, and I think what the other cool things were, like we said, it's a mirrored plane, so quite a lot of it is mirrored. But the thing I thought was really cool, again, just talking about the sort of geographical features of it, is that there is no natural light per se, but it still goes, dark and light as well. But I love the idea that you look up and you don't see stars, but you see the little fires and campfires glistening around. I just thought that's such a cool concept, that they're far enough away that you can't make out the thing. It's not like Inception, like where things are bent over, but it's just I just thought that was so interesting and really, really cool. Like this idea that you can the sky changes and they're flickering, and it's just you can be a lot very flavorful.
It's such a lovely feeling, isn't it, actually? Because I think that's, well, if we want to get too into it, I think that idea of like when you look at the stars, they're lights of other people, you have that sort of, is there anyone out there? But in that there is other people that you're looking out at, which is kind of nice, and that sort of,
I really like that.
Whilst we're on the sort of like weather, the climatic elements of the geography, every day is the same length as every other day, but they do experience all 4 seasons. So the 2 layers, we haven't named them. The layer which is more pastoral, more the more craft and artisanal, working from the already got raw materials, is called Dothian, which is much more calm rolling hills, much more, the seasons are mild, so the winters are mild, they never get bitterly cold, and the summers are not unbearably hot. It's all very just beautiful. It will get colder in the winter and it will get hotter in summer, but I just imagine it's like always like a brisk February, those first sunny early, like late winter days, whilst and
I just wanted to add on to that, because again I got another UK reference, which again I appreciate you might not get, but did you ever watch as a kid reruns of Campbell Whip Green with Windy Miller at all?
No, I didn't.
No. So it's like a very stop motion thing, and it's all, everyone's like, hello Windy Miller, hello this.
Oh yeah,
and it's
I can guess what it's like.
Yeah, you could have guessed exactly what it's like, but that's the idea I had, was like this is all very much like everyone knows each other, everyone's like, aha, so again very idealistic, like, oh, how's the crops doing today? Oh, they're doing very well. Oh, great. Well, I can't wait to try your bread. It is very Archers, Campbell Whip Green. So that's how, again, playing that to your players, if they're not 100% sure, because obviously we've just come realistically from the Beastlands. It's not as wild here. There's a few more towns to play, but it still have that beautiful pastoral-esque idea.
And I think it's that it does mention that about like the fauna of the place is very much less sort of like aggressive, bestial sort of. It's not jaguars and panthers like that. It's very much like, it's very much more like boar probably, and horses and cows and sheep and goats and stuff like that. It's very much more a pastoral sort of like existence than sort of bears and sort of like things that are going to attack, or more dangerous animals as well.
Yes.
Agreed. So then the other plane then that we've been mentioning is Shuruk, which is is the opposite. There it's chilling, blustery winds herald the arrival of charcoal black storm clouds, driving sheets of rain, or snow that whips through the air, stinging, cutting exposed skin. And sort of like the weather also translates into the sort of landscape. So instead of rolling hills and rivers and streams and ponds, it's more rushing streams and whitewater rapids and rougher, rugged. I'm thinking more the crags in the moors more, and Lake District, but like getting up into the crags.
Actual,
crags. The sort of
like rocky. if you've read any sort of like Wuthering Heights, that idea like,
Yeah.
oh, the Moors, and they're very
Yeah.
passionate, temperate, etc. Yeah, the idea that the people who live there, they're rougher, wilder, but they're more independent.
Yeah.
So they're not necessarily isolated, but that's not like a bad thing. It's just like we're just with our environment. So yeah, definitely. Again, for inspiration, looking at smaller towns who you maybe even like further afield than, obviously, I know we are very UK focused, but like, you know, thinking about like is it the Mayans, I think, or Machu Picchu and all that sort of thing, where they, you know, they have really high villages in mountains and stuff like that, and they just get on with it. You know, they don't get, you know, it's like, well, this is our existence, we've dealt with this. You know.
Yeah, and it's like, it is slightly less inhabited, but it's more like, because of the weather, people are in smaller, close-knit communities based around the sort of the ore or raw material that they're collecting. So whilst I see that they're independent in different ways, if you're on Dothian, you're more independent in that you don't rely on so many other people for your existence, but then have more independence in your craft, because you literally make your craft yourself. You just need to get the raw materials to then do what you're making. You might have a couple of people working for you, whilst on Dothian, you're more independent in that you are separated from more people, but then you are in smaller groups, and you're more dependent on those people for survival and for the craft that your work, which is like mining for the ore, or tending to the forests, and sort of getting the lumber and all that. So it's kind of they're interesting, and I think you can find sort of like interesting relations between the two of those, I think, which is quite I think that's kind of, it's kind of fun, and it kind of creates enough of a, unlike a lot of other layers where I think there's this one has quite a lot more similarities between each of them, but they're very much like a two sides of the same coin, as I say.
Yes, and it's more obvious that as a result. Yeah.
Yeah. Exactly.
I've also double checked. It's Incan, not Mayan, for Machu Picchu. I knew as I said, I was like, I'm gonna get it wrong, so I'll just double check that. Yes, Incans. Anyway, I thought I'd check and not be shouted at later on.
Yeah. So I think that really gives you an overview of the sort of geography of the place, because otherwise it's very there are big towns and there are big centres, and we will come on to those. So is it worth moving on to those first, and then we could go on to the magical conditions? So like places
let's do that. Yeah, I think that makes sense. Yeah, these ideas of having like the centres where that is the biggest sort of marketplace, or that's the place you're most likely to go with your adventurers. Absolutely.
Yeah. So when you're on the first plane, it's the first plane because we say it's the first plane, and it's one you think at the bottom because it's the first one they talk about, which is Dothian, which is the one you enter through Trade Gate. So Trade Gate is its outlands post. Like all of these have a gate town on the outlands, and Trade Gate is the one for Bytopia. And so you then enter into Dothian from there. So the land of pastoral industry, as it said. So it's the pre-industrial world, as it calls it again. So here the main center is known as Yeoman, which is again, it's obviously got very English tones to it. It's very hard because a yeoman is the sort of is a type of like the old English for sort of working the land sort of peoples. So people that run the land. I can't remember actually. I should know this from our Tudor learnings, but I've forgotten it. What they do, what actually a yeoman does.
Yes, something like that. I again, don't look at me.
Yeah.
But I think because that's like the big sort of market, like decent sized market burg, and then any of the towns around it, which he doesn't really mention too much in the book itself. But again, that obviously invites you to do it. But this idea that most towns, they're just farming communities, and they're each organised enough to have their own town militia and town council. So you're like, perfect. That means you could just drop them in anywhere and go,
that's
well,
exactly
can we
right.
go? And you're like, this way. So
But Yeoman is the heart, it's the centre of it, and it's run by a conclave of masters, which is a group of guild masters and mistresses that has to approve by simple majority vote all of the mayor's schemes. So there's a mayor and there's a sort of council below that. And so you can kind of see there's some good, like you can imagine some quite good political intrigue between those things. And and it's basically got the Great Bazaar, where there's going to be all of the objects that you want to, if you're ever going there to buy anything, is where everything is happening. That is the centre of the town. I think what's interesting is that there is there is a spell particular to
Yes.
Bytopia, which is called Value, and it's been
Value.
made because there's a lot, just so that you can cast this on things, if you learn the spell, to determine the value within a certain, depending on your skill sets, and without going too deep into it, you can get better rolls for it. But basically, it will tell you within good knowledge of what the value of something is by using a magical means. People will find it a little bit. Will get a bit peery if you use it upon them, but obviously they will use it equally upon anyone else. So you have to go in there with the knowledge that it's just to try and find if you're getting something, because there was a big problem, it said, with people making fakes and trying to sell fake items and trying to overvalue things. It was so common that they had to make the spell to overcome it.
And what's interesting, I think, again, we've talked about it briefly on the show before, I think on our sibling podcast, sorry, this idea of Acquisitions Incorporated. So it's not necessarily about the adventuring, it's about making a franchise of adventurers.
Yeah.
And in their source book as well, they have similar spells. They have a spell called Distort Value. So it's the opposite of that. But again, as far as I'm aware, they've not travelled to Bytopia in any of their current things.
Need to.
Right, because you think this is a perfect thing where they have to go, set up a franchise here, and business, because that's what their sort of theme is all about. So I think that could work so well. And this idea of value, I just love that idea with, and it talks about this idea with, that streets are never empty, and you're always haggling over the finer points at the till at all hours, but you always get a fair deal. They're not trying to screw you over in any way. They just want a fair thing for their stuff. And you're right with the idea of this, like the conclave of masters. They're all like, as long as we make good, as long as it keeps doing what you're doing, that's fine. So they allow for this, what sounds like the mayor as a sort of like posturing, a sort of like over the top, and you're like, this would make such a good thing. Because all it takes is like one really bad day at the market, and they're like, well, it's time to
change the mayor.
Them out.
Use the mayor as a scapegoat for anything and move it around.
Yeah, I think the only quick things I was going to add was that obviously it says so the credit is unheard of, so it's all transacted on the spot. They sell pretty much everything except no evil practices, so no unsavory goods like cursed items, and especially no slavery, which is quite nice to see, and make it state it as an obvious thing. So that's quite good. And I'll say this: I haven't read the adventure, but in the Adventures in Conflict book, there is a map of the bazaar that you could use.
It's not. I had a look at it, to be honest, and it is very much like here's a plan of a couple of like out market stalls. It doesn't really. It's
very small.
It's not as like I was expecting something quite exciting and like areas of a bazaar. If you've ever looked at if you've ever been to Morocco and been to the Great Bazaar in Marrakesh, and I forget the name of the actual bazaar. I know Jarm El Fina is the actual big market square, but the bazaar that's off it, I forgot the name of. But that actually is, if you can find a map of that is a beautiful map of which they actually sell when you're there and like have on to try and help you go around it. It's a great example of a good like winding street markets, and then also of and it's sort of like people do arrange themselves amongst it into this is a little bit of the spices area and this is a little bit it doesn't always like define itself like that. But I think if you were looking for something more, you're looking for a good off the shelf, here's a map of a real place. It's a good one to use.
Oh, that sounds great. I think, like I said, I haven't looked at the Conflict and Adventures one, but I think, if you were like, I don't really like it yet, you can use anything like that. That's a really, really good example. Like, for me, the most sort of like famous market that I know is Bury Market, because it's world famous. It says so on its sign.
Does it? Is it Bury Market? Is it?
Bury Market is very famous.
There you go.
But again, what's interesting is similar sort of thing that they've got all these stalls and stuff like that, and it changes all the time. And there's never like one perfect map of everything. You could always this, that, and the other. But there's so many inspirations you could do that. So if you're like, okay, I need to find a map, just Google famous markets and then put it in, because
the Grand Bazaar in Istanbul as well is another great one. That's a more ordered one. Like if you want, so like because that's the thing. I was trying to think of like, because I think that some of them are going to be more chaotic and some are going to be more ordered, and it's like you've got to remember that this place is very neutral. So it's trying to find that sort of attitude to things.
Mixture of both.
Yeah, you want to find that.
You don't want it to be too chaotic. Yeah, I'm thinking myself, like here we've got stuff like close to me is Roman Road Market, which is just like a one long street of just constant like loads of stuff. Obviously there's Brick Lane, all exactly. Borough Market, So again, always yep, exactly. So there's this again. London has so many as well, but there's again. We should always go further afield, like you said. So and just and go experience them yourselves now that if it's safe to do so, obviously.
Yeah, of course. Then I think the other main sort of like there's a cool thing that I wanted to add, but I'll come back to the pub, the wandering pub later. Yes. But the other key sort of like location very much relates to the peoples of Bytopia. One of the pantheon that makes its home here, as we mentioned, is the Gnomish pantheon, and so with that they have a section of Dothian that they inhabit called the Golden Hills, and each of these 7 hills, I think I'm correct in saying. I want to clarify.
One for each god.
Yeah, exactly. A rolling sort of area that is also known as Dothian as well. Some people will refer to it in the area as Dothian just because, like, you have to. They have to make it. It's like Isgard. There's a place in Isgard called Isgard. That you can Isgard. Yeah. You can spell jammer in your Spelljammer whilst writing the Spelljammer in Spelljammer.
Spelljammer. Yeah,
exactly.
What?
Yeah. It's this warm congenial domain sits like a crown atop an area of rolling terrain in Dothian and is marked by the golden tint all the plants and animals in the realm possess. The golden grass, leaves and toadstools aren't worth any jink, at least for any value other than beauty, but the entire realm is suffused in the friendly golden glow of the Berg's residents. It's like you just imagine that Teletubby bloom.
Oh my god! Oh well, now that's my image ruined of the.
It's just that bloom effect that you get when you watch Teletubbies. But I think it obviously starts with Garl Glittergold, who is the gnomish god of protection, humour, trickery, gem cutting, cooperation, and smithing, who is the sort of head of the pantheon. I think, is that correct?
Like I said, there's these sort of these different gnomes that live there. The 7 different gnomes, and also the one we do not speak about, and he is at the top of this sort of thing. And again, if you go back, and I won't go beyond on it too much here, but it's very good because he has this sort of attitude of like mischief doesn't mean harm. So it's just like it's like we should all work together and produce good work and keep going, but it's okay not to take yourselves too seriously. And that's very interesting because that point of view is very different to, say, the dwarves, who have a very similar hard-working craft is really good, blah, 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 and they keep going and going and going, but to the point where it doesn't matter. Like there's actually, I can't remember which, again, this is where it's really bad, I can't remember which one it is, which of the planes it is, where dwarves are like, we've sold our stuff, and people are like, oh, I'm getting a really good deal for this, and they're like, it's not my best work, so I can take that. Whereas here it's very different because it's just like, we're working very hard, we'll get a good deal for it, but we're going to have a bit of a laugh because it doesn't matter.
Exactly. Gnomes. The Garl role as leader of the pantheon is twofold: to remind all gnomes to work together and to show them that while life sometimes may be difficult, it's important to retain a sense of humour. So I kind of I'm sort of if I was going to choose a pantheon, I'm thought I'll go with Garl next time if I'm ever going to play a character. Like I'll just take that sort of. It kind of makes sense.
Because I guess because it's the idea of trickery and playing pranks on people, they're good natured, and the thing is that I guess the trick is like, again, it's always good to play a little prank and then have fun at it. But I think my worry would be people constantly like, oh, it's trickery, so I'm going to constantly play prank. I'm going to constantly do this and this and that. No. It's just like, have a good nature one. It's like, and it's more poking the fun at people who are being too serious, and taking themselves too seriously.
Note that mischief is not the same as harm.
Yeah,
which I think it does make that note, and I think it's really and so spells of illusion and phantasm school are enhanced on this area to benefit applies as long as the caster intends no harm in any of the realm's inhabitants. So it's that sort of like, if you want to just play a trick on someone for a joke, it's good. And I think it's an interesting sort of like, because players exactly can just sort of like, it's finding that line is an interesting point, and I think it's good. I like it. Really.
No, I agree. And looking at the hills themselves, they're sort of in this particular Planescape book. It talks about 3 special areas where 3 of the gnomish deities sort of say. So we've got the Gemstone Borough, the Mithril Forge, and Whisperleaf, and they're sort of individual places,
Yeah.
and each of them are really interesting because again, it's this idea of it because it's obviously a deity's sort of place, and so they are sort of infinite, and they can hold all the population of gnomes, and you're like, yeah, but it's just one big tunnel and all that sort of thing, and yeah, like I quite like here, and it happened in the previous one as well with the Beastlands and stuff like that. There are certain areas of spells that obviously are more enhanced. So, like for example, the Gemstone Burrow, you get the benefit of animal friendship to only digging and burrowing animals. There's a big thing about digging and burrowing compared to other animal types here, which I thought was quite funny. You have to make it very specific.
This
like,
is my Wind in the Willows place because it has the Badger Lord, the Gopher Lord, and the Mole Lord, as I said. So they're all in their tweed jackets and going, "Oh, hello, it's Badger Lord here." And
so digging, yes.
Yeah, we're going to have some tea. Yeah, digging. I don't know. It just kind of, I liked it. And but I do like the chant on this one. We're deep in the burrows. There's a rumor to be the treasure hoard of the Pantheon. I mean, it's called the Gemstone Burrow, isn't it? Right, so like, what do you expect? And it's kind of like, you say that to players, they're going to be, hello, I'm just here to have a wander. What's down that corner? There's something glittery.
Yeah, exactly. But again, it's that sort of playing tricks on people. You know, that could be really play into it. And then you have stuff like the Mithril Forge, this idea of like a living, breathing forge right out of a huge vein of silverish ore. And that's the benefit you get, like almost like the benefit of a Ring of Fire resistance for one full day, even if you go and leave. Which is, again, I guess for me, it's like, it's just interesting. But like, would players go, oh, we need to go fight a dragon, red dragon at some point? I know where we'll go. You know, I don't know. I guess it's interesting, but
why
I don't know how you. Yeah. I guess it's like, oh, it's just something interesting, but I don't know if you would ever gain any benefit as a player from it. If you just go, oh, I happen to be resistant for a day.
Well, like, I think the other thing is any gnome who stands bathed in the light and heat of the Mithril Forge gains the effects of a Ring of Fire resistance for one full day, as you said, which is like, is that what? Which is the sort of, as you said, going there. But then, I think if you're like, I don't know. I think it depends on how you want to. Like, if you're just thinking like, we need to forge a weapon. Here is, let's not just go to the Dwarven lands. Here is an alternate, you know, just another option of like, let's go to the Mithril Forge. Because what's interesting about this that I like is that the tunnels extend under the other plane, so you can actually go between the planes there, and the layers, sorry, and to other planes. So you could be like, it could be like you're stuck in the abyss. And if you had a gnomish character, maybe they have a connection to this. It is Flandel Steelskin, then maybe they might be able to tunnel their way out of the abyss into this plane, or which could be fun. Or you could have accidentally gone through a tunnel on on the material plane and end up here, and this is like, and then get lost in and it's like about getting back from Bytopia, and the only way to get back from Bytopia is by walking, and it just gives you an opportunity to exist in another plane if you want just a sort of break from like. Maybe your players have just been in a massive dungeon crawl, and suddenly they wander down the wrong way on the way back and end up here. It just could be like an interesting break in your campaign to sort of just like experience something different and just get them involved in you know, there are some other stories later on, but that might be a route in, which is kind of how I saw it.
No, I think that's completely fair. And then if you think about the final place at the Golden Hills, this Whisperleaf place,
love it.
Which is great for various reasons. You have like a wild wanderer, the gnomish protector of the glades and the forests, but also the patron of gnomish thieves. And so this idea, I've never seen this before, is that you get the benefit if you go to Whisperleaf, this sort of half burrow, half cottage on the top of one of the hills by some trees. You gain the benefit, like you function as a level 1 thief for the duration of your stay on Bytopia.
Yeah.
Like,
I like that.
And that's a very cool thing. And I think here is interesting because it plays into that idea of playing pranks on people. Because something you mentioned off recording, this idea of when you leave, something is missing from your pack. It's not necessarily something vital, but something that you probably use quite a bit. And the only way you can get it back is if you play a significant or a decent sized prank on somebody else that doesn't involve violence.
Yeah, exactly. I love that. It's such a great idea. Yeah, so much fun.
You say, oh, I need that rope. And you're like, you have to, I don't know.
Now, what am I going to prank? How am I going to prank them? And it just allows your players to think, this is what I mean, like, it's a good break in a campaign for just a bit of fun. You know, like, let's just go here. You could take them to Whisperleaf and it's like, you've just and someone's pranked you, but at the same time, like 5 seconds, when you leave, you go, oh, you lost that, and then someone tells you, or like the only way to get it back is to, when you're next at the walking tree, which we'll get onto, that they tell you, the only way you get it back is to do an equal or sort of prank on someone. So then your players will have this fun like idea of coming up with a good enough prank to get their stuff back, and I don't know, it's a nice little breather.
Again, I'm taking it away slightly from the thing, but there's a social deduction. No, it's a social party game that's come out called You Got. Or Don't Get Got, or something like that, and you get like little missions, and everyone's at the party's playing, and the idea is that you have to play, you have to get them to do something. Or so for example, if you've got like a hat, you brought a hat to the party, and you want to get another person to put them on without telling them to put it on, so you just wear it.
I've played a similar game where everyone gets roles to play, a little cards to use in the game in a party situation to get away with. It's a really good game. Yeah.
Oh, it's a great game. There's a great review of it on Shut Up and Sit Down, where the person's saying it was the most tense thing ever, because I was like, I need them to put on my hat, and then they went away and they came back and they were wearing it, and it was like, yes, like, and it's such a small little thing. But
they do a let's play of it, do they?
And it's like a review of it, but they do like a recreation with minis.
Right.
I'll send it to you afterwards. It's very good. But yeah, so I think that could be something very like, again, if your players are like, you could send a message to one of your players saying you need to pull a prank on the paladin, and then but they can't know about it, because if they know about it, it's You Got, isn't it? So you got like the idea the rogue's just like, just like they're going, oh, I need to think of something that's not cruel, but also like get it, and then just be like, ha, you got, yes, I get my thieves' tools back. Like,
exactly. No, I love it. Oh, that's really good. Or your component
really
pouch
fun.
or something like that. It's something that's no, that's really cool.
Something that could be replaced, but it's more fun to sort of buy into that thing. Yeah, no, that makes me actually that would be quite a fun outside game mechanic to put in. I'm always a big fan of like the report cards thing from Strixhaven. That's the thing. It's like okay, let's try You Got, but in Bytopia.
Oh, that's really cool.
Fun.
No, I like that. Okay, that's really good. Yeah, that's awesome. So then the one last place to then talk about that I think was interesting is the Wandering Treant, as I mentioned, which is on the road from Tradegate to Yeoman. The most fortunate caravans find the Wandering Treant Inn, and it is, as it suggests, a wandering, moving tree person.
Yes.
So it wanders the stretch of that road, and it stands at 80 foot tall. It's got like no fires are allowed, clearly, inside it, and there are no stables, because if you've got horses, they've either got to follow along or they've got to leave them.
They get pulled behind you,
but it has places to stay, and it's got like you can get salads to eat and stuff, but there's obviously
salads and cold meat dishes.
But I feel I would use it as like a train, like it's in, you get on and it will take you the route. Like I just think it just goes back and forward, and so you could just get on at Tradegate if you were there, and you'd get onto the tree, and then by the time you've spent a couple of days or a day on there, you end up at Yeoman or something like that, and get you follow the path.
I quite liked how, like it said, like so obviously no fires allowed, but I also like how it does have running water because of the roots. I thought that was quite fun. And then cool. and then there's like, it talked a little bit about the beers and liquors you can have, and they're like across the multiverse, and it gave some examples, and I'm like, that's actually really cool, this idea that it's because obviously it is a Treant's huge, and that's just like you've got these rooms, stuff like that, but also you could be like,
it's got the best seller in the world, which could be a fun mini silly heist. Do you know what I mean?
Exactly.
You need to get a bottle of Aborian wine or something like that for someone, so
Yeah, absolutely. I think that is such a cool idea. It's like the moving pub, essentially. And I like the idea that it is on a circuit, like you said, so you can get on and drop off and all that sort of thing. And it actually has a really cool thing that like the partner of the tree is the person that runs it, and it's an agreement. It's not like someone's latched on to, oh, we've made a pub and the treant doesn't know about it. The treant does know about it. So
the treant's in on the money basically of it. So which runs it with their partner, who is Fayai?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. So I thought that was, because we've not seen anything like that. We've had obviously the party train from Arborea that's like carries on, and that's more destructive, whereas this seems more like ship-like, because it takes its time.
Yeah, exactly. As a ship is a good example. Actually, I like that. That's sort of a good way of putting it. It's like a little a ferry, but a walking ferry.
Yeah, a ferry. Yeah, absolutely.
If you've ever been to the beach and they have those tractors that go in the water to take you. Yeah, it's like that. It kind of reminds me a bit like this in a sense.
Yeah. No, I agree. I really
Such
like
a
that.
British way of getting into water, isn't it? On a tractor. So
Yeah, absolutely. The only other place I want to talk about before we move on to the other layer is the Baku graveyard, because this is on this layer. So this idea, again, going back to that sort of like it's like a herd of like great woolly tusked beasts that roam near like a large grove of ancient trees, and it's sort of supposed to be like rumored to be like a graveyard for that holy orders of the Baku, which is very I always assumed it was similar to trees themselves, the tree ant stuff, but I believe now they are separate. And it's like nobody ever goes in and nobody ever comes out, because if you go in, not only have you got the tree ants, but you've also got the Baku, and they're just gonna, it's a holy site for them, so they're gonna just stop you. They'll put you in the dead book, so to speak. But then it's sort of, it's like, well, why would you go in there anyway? Because it's obviously like for us, but like, it's not for us. But also, it sort of mentions offhandedly, it's like, oh, it's actually maybe where the younger Baku sort of come about, and so maybe it's they're protecting stuff. You're like, well, that makes sense. And then that's kind of it, and you're like, I don't know. There wasn't enough there.
It didn't have a lot to it. It was just kind of like, this is where it is. But I think it was one of those like, we're leaving it up to you to figure that out sort of thing. I think they're a very interesting creature, by the way. Did you actually look at any photos of them? So I've just picked some up now.
Really.
I will get some on screen. But they are a chimeric creature. So they are an elephant meets lion sort of creature. It depicts it differently in other things, but it's like a leonine elephant. And the best photo I found is this one, and I will try and get it up on the screen. But that one?
Yes. Oh, I see that now. Yeah.
Yeah.
Ooh, interesting.
They're quite an interesting. There's quite, so there's
like a bipedal, but like strong hind legs, but the tusks, but also elephant-like. How interesting. Yeah. I typed in Baku into Google, and I just got the capital city of Azerbaijan. So I was like,
Azerbaijan, yeah, exactly. Which is where they Formula One is.
Exactly. So I was like, no, that's not what I'm looking for. But so they're very interesting. I guess maybe then a plot hook would be like, oh, we've heard that there are rumors of younger Baku. We want to steal one. And it's like a heist that you get put on for that, and maybe a bit of a poaching type thing, but it's obviously bad, and like the ethics and all that sort of thing as well. It could be an interesting one on that front.
It could actually, as a way, or you could be roped into protecting the, like they need to because they have the child is a holy one, and so like maybe you have to like help get them out of the like from somewhere to another plane or something like that, or they've been sort of taken, you've got to get them back, or I don't know, there's some things that you could use for that, or even just like I don't know, maybe maybe like the March of the Baku, like March of the Penguins type thing. They just there's a big sort of shifter of March, and they have to come here and you have to protect them. So you know what, I like that better than the poaching one, so I'll take that one instead. Okay. I think then, whilst we're talking about like particular creatures, and then when we're like shifting planes in the skies between, there are things called air sentinels, which are more common in the other plane, but they're a specific sort of in the picture of the plane. They
horrible.
Are a sort of fishy like creature that floats in the sky, but they are a helpful creature, particularly on the other plane layer, which is Shuruk, the storm rat, as it's known. So as we said, Shuruk is the more rough and raw sort of landscape. They suggest that that the sort of chaotic winds and stuff are brought upon by the evil god of the pantheon. I've forgotten their name now.
Erdel. I believe that's how you pronounce it.
Who's like sort of cursed the land a little bit with it, in sort of thing. And there's also a beautiful story. There was a beautiful story actually at the beginning of the book of this chapter. Is it in this chapter or is it? So which is about the source of the light. I forgot to mention this whilst we're in the sky. Which comes from the Indian pantheon. So an unnamed sun god trapped the sky between the two layers, and others shake their heads and say that an East Indian power, Savitri, which I don't know if I'm saying that correctly, Savitri, lights the daytime sky. One chant goes that the ages eons ago, Savitri had a large realm of Bytopia where he lived with his pious and gentle wife. It seems that Savitri was a noble and wise prince who sought not wealth in a wife, but in love, and in some sort of this legend was the no princess married to a wise hermit, and there's a lot more going on. But upon they fell in love, soon were married, but 1 year after the marriage she died, and the cause of her death is unknown. When the god of the dead arrived to claim her, he followed them to the underworld. So it's very similar to the Greek story of Orpheus, isn't it?
Orpheus,
and, yeah. So it has a very links to that similar thing, and featuring convinced Yama, who's the god of the dead, was deep love of his wife, and the god of the dead relented, returning her to life. And each morning's daylight means that he is still committed to his old home, and though he's not returned again to live there, it's said that his light proves that love is stronger than death. And the god of the day, long sun, now spends most of the time on Elysium, in no small part to his conquest over the power of death. So it's kind of like a lovely just bit of, I don't know, just a little bit of lore and story that is I just like the idea that there's, at the heart of this, there's something additional, which is this sort of love conquering death that you could play upon and add a layer additional if you so wished. And there is one of the adventures in this in that book takes you to the underworld.
Oh, really? Cool.
Yeah, and relates somehow to this.
Yeah, so that's a really interesting. That's the point I was going to make. So I think when you have folklore tales like that, which are really interesting, it's like, because I feel like, say compared to Curse of Strahd, I know I'm not going to give you any spoilers for it, where there are folklore stories which are pertinent to the, like, what's going on in the bigger picture and what's involved with your players. I just like the idea that they overhear like a story being told about this folklore and stuff like that, and it's just, it's not nothing to do with them. It's nothing to do with like the grander scheme of what they're doing. It's just a really cool thing. I think sprinkling stuff like that in is really important, and I think we should do more of that. Like, you sit by a campfire, what are you guys doing tonight? Are you asking questions or stuff like that? And they're like, I'm just listening in. And they're like, okay, here's my time to shine and tell you all the lore that I've learnt about. Which I think could work really well.
Yeah, no, I think that's the thing, and it's that nice little, you could hear that story when you're in the Wandering Tree End, couldn't you? I was going to say by a fire, but not by a fire. by a warming stone or something like that. Like maybe you could do some sort of heat metal.
It'd be like some illusion magic or something like that, because illusions are more enhanced on this plane in general. So
So that's So then once we move out of the sky and over to and it goes the underworld, the upside down, we find ourselves in Shuruk. Now, as it says, it is very much about mines and glades for forests for lumber and digging down for materials such as metal ore, as well as gems, uncut gems, and all this sort of thing.
Yeah.
So there aren't as many sort of areas of like import around here as there is because it hasn't got like a place like Yeoman or anything like that. There is if you've gone up the Centre Spire and down again, you would find at the bottom of this place there is the Last Chance Inn. I think it's called, which is a great name. Before you make the climb, and that is basically a place where you can rest before you get up there.
Yeah, and that's the waypoint essentially.
Exactly, it's like a base camp for
pretty much. Again, you can have a lot of fun with that when people going, I can't do it. It's like, you've got all the way here. Come on, no, I can't. It's too scary. Like, what if I fall?
Exactly. One of the cool things I do like in Centre Spire is that you can travel. So in Shuruk at the base, there's lots of tunnels into the spire, and you could try and make your way up instead of being on the outside, but from the inside, because they've mined into that spire. But there is a gate at the point in the cavern where there's the shift of the gravity.
The points essentially,
And because it's positioned not really belonging to either of the layers, its destination changes. So most often, a cutter passing through it can find themselves on the astral plane. But for unknown reasons, or at least unspoken reasons, sometimes the gate delivers its passengers to the first layer of the Beastlands, or Bytopia, or onto the Outlands, or another dark unknown. Any boat that's on certain rare occasions might deposit you on Gehenna, Carceri, or the Grey Wastes. So that could be a fun little mini issued.
Yeah, like you're like, oh, we'll just go quick jaunt in the inside,
Yeah,
and
that
then
sounds
then
safer.
you go somewhere else. Yeah, no,
Yeah.
I thought that was quite a cool little. But then because also it means like you can go somewhere else, but that means also other people can come in this way.
Yeah.
So that could be an interesting like incursion point if you were having stuff from
Exactly. Yeah.
places
Oh
that are a bit
yeah.
inside the map.
Like an
So it's not just
inverse
one way.
of that battle of the keep, whatever it's called. I've forgotten the name of the keep in Lord of the Rings, whatever it is.
Oh no! Why did you do this before?
Sorry, I'm sorry. But it's like the inverse of that, because they're coming through the keep instead of the other way around.
Yes.
From the one.
Yes.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Because I've got to mention
Helm's Deep.
Helm's Deep. That's
Deep.
it. And then because I've got to mention every dragon there is on every plane, there's the layer of the adamantite dragon, which is a dragon you don't hear of very much. But they have a crystalline cavern, which is in its own self is blinding to those who are willing to do evil towards them, whilst it is still blind, but it's still bright and like blooming for people that are, and they can become dazed and dizzy by it. On top of the fact that it is got gems as well in their hoard.
I like that dazzling thing. So it could be 1d10 hours for anyone in general. But if you're evil, it's 1d4 like days.
Blinded.
Hours. Yeah. Oh, sorry, I've got that wrong. 1d10 rounds.
Yeah.
And 1d4 hours.
Yeah, exactly.
So that's like. So it's really interesting. Like you still can't see. No. Mary's evil. Oh well, we knew this whole time. But yeah, this dragon. I'm going to say this wrong. Mercy Allah. They are a self-appointed guardian of all that is good in the rugged area of Shirok. Which I was like, ooh, that's quite a cool little
she keeps
title.
the layer as safe for mortals and petitioners as she can. So she's a very good aligned dragon that goes around, whatever that means again. But like, just goes, but is there as like a protector of the lands, and is there to you can find yourself as like a refuge in their layer, which I think is nice. They've also like there's like a little mini sort of story with one of which is that there's two minions of Set, so from the Egyptian pantheon is going after the other Egyptian power in here, Tefnut, and so they have tried to figure out and stop people trying to come in and attack each other.
Very cool.
I also like the little note about the rust dragon may have found its way in because some of the rich mineral veins are just disappearing, and so maybe that's a little go fight a rust dragon on behalf of a adamantite dragon. It's always useful to have a dragon on your side if you can do a good,
Yeah, I like that. Yeah, do them a favor, and then you'll get you got a dragon on your back. That's really cool. Yeah, I like that. And then you have something. I guess the final big thing in this is we talked about Titans last episode at Carceri. There's now a Titan in this place. Yeah. And we both, I think I struggled with Epimethus. This idea that they've just sort of turned up and they're like, I will build a home here. I will build a place here. And I will say again, the terminology about this isn't great because obviously it's from a different era. But I like the phrase I liked is that this person is a nice Titan but causes more harm than good. I think that's a really nice personality thing. And it's not necessarily that they're low intelligence or anything like that. It's more like, I'm just trying to help, and the more they try and help, the more harm they do. So build this huge tower, it's too big, it falls over, and they're like, oh no. And we've all been in those DIY projects where you just sat around surrounded by instruction manuals and bits of wood, and you're just like, I don't know
Am
what
I right
can do.
in thinking that this is the Titan that has tried to ignore their intelligence? Is that right? Is that correct? I think.
Oh, I don't know off the top of my head.
Might be getting but they do things without thinking. They've tried to perfect a way of doing things without thinking, which is why the only faction that really comes into play here is the Ciphers, which is the Transcendent Order, is also what they're known as, whose base philosophy is that you do without thought. And they are very much they're sort of on the in Planescape, in Sigil, their home is the training grounds, and it's all about action without thought. It's about finding the sort of natural flow of the body and doing things like trying to get in one with the natural order, so that you, or whatever is immediate, so that you are one with the universe, because you're not adding your consciousness onto it. You're basically affecting what seems right at the time. And so they've got interested with this character. Also, mind affecting spells such as Confusion and Maze are enhanced when at this site, due to the Titans' influence on that.
Which I thought that was I like that thing as well. I think it's just, again, it's a description of, like, again, maybe it's like, oh, they're not all there.
No, I know there is that, which I'm trying to overcome. I'm just trying to, as in, I'm just saying that you can take that in a more positive way, which is taking on that sort of, like, more thought without action sort of point.
Yeah, which is true, because we do that all the
time. Exactly. But their tower that they've made, this ridiculous tower, just makes me think of anyone. Google some Frank Gehry buildings, you'll understand what I mean by that. But there's also, as a Barthite or Barthonian or whatever it is, there's a famous person called Beckford, who gained their money from ill-gotten gains. So they're not very nice. The family wasn't a very nice family. However, this person was really just like the classic rich kid, didn't do any, like, just became a poet and just laid about and spent all his family's money.
I have heard of this guy. Yeah.
And there's a tower that looks over Bath that was once part of the rest of a house, and that burnt down, but all that's left is this tower which used to go and sit up and ponder life and the meaning of the world and write poetry from, which sounds all very lovely. Sort of like, that's all right. It's all right for some, isn't it? You just can sit and look over the Valley of Bath. But he also had this place called Fonthill Abbey, which he made a house that looked like an abbey, and there's some drawings of it, and the entrance is like huge, and it has this it's just literally a huge cathedral-like space. It was one of the biggest houses I think ever in the country, and it had this tower that just kept falling down because it was just bigger and bigger, and it never made, and it continued to, like, it kept burning down, kept falling down, this house, and it doesn't exist anymore. There's just ruins of it now. There is nothing of it, and it just reminded me of that, this sort of, like, you could play it if you want. I'm just thinking if you wanted to get away from the sort of, like, connotations of that, and also you just ignoring Beckford's negative connotations, but if you had this idea of maybe a Titan who is more like just going on going ever greater and grander ideals, but never really reaching them because they just want to go more and more and more, and it keeps failing because of that.
It's not necessarily the will is there, the passion is there, but the commitment to follow through and to take the time to plan.
Exactly. Do it right. It's actually there. It's just like, I want to make it bigger. Let's just do it greater and greater and greater, but never actually thinking the structural connotations of what that is, and just like. So
I do like that interpretation a lot more. I think that makes it, and I like the idea that it's not seen as a threat or anything like that. No. It's that sort of like, okay, well, we'll deal with it.
It's that sort of it goes with that sort of craft as well, of like wanting to create something beautiful and magnificent, but sort of lacking both elements of the process. So very aesthetic, but not the form,
I like that
not following the function, or sort of like, the sort of thing.
I actually like that a lot. I guess speaking of like the politics perhaps, and a little bit of factions, there isn't much on Bytopia. There's not much that people want to fight over, although there's been this talk from the Order of the Plains Militant that they're now recruiting people in places like Yeoman and stuff like that, because it's that idea of hoping to steal large chunks of plains to add them to their own plane in Mount Celestia, and you're like, hang on, what? It's quite it's quite cheeky, right? And I like that. That again, it's like the charity, the chuggers we call them in the UK, but this idea that people just keep going up, and you're like, why? Hang on, and it's like, this is good.
I've never heard of this term, chuggers. Sorry, I don't know.
Chuggers, it's charity muggers is the slang.
Right.
They get you outside with a clipboard and stuff.
Okay.
That's again. That is just UK slang.
Okay.
Just what we're going to. But I like this idea that they're also trying to like clamp down on this like freewheeling business deals that occur on the plane. So they're the ones that are introducing taxes, tariffs, forms, bureaucracy, and they're hoping
that's it, isn't it? Like turning it into a more because they want to turn it into a more lawful plane to then for it to transition, like we've talked about in. Arborea, where it moved over to Mecanus because it got too lawful. It got more evil, didn't it? Sorry, it got more evil because it was already lawful, but it became more neutral because it balanced this good with evil thanks to the harmonium being bastards. And in this one, they're trying to make it more lawful so that it goes good lawful and moves over to them. Which I think is interesting because actually they've implied a lot more conflict in. They've tried very hard, Wizards Coast, to apply more conflict in these good aligned planes. So there is something to adventure on because there is, and they're using the system very well. I'd say that they've done I'm just congratulating them in some respects. It's giving them a bit of a boost in that they have to say that they have worked hard on those planes to allow adventures to occur, based on some of the harmonious stuff. Is actually, I think it could be done better nowadays. But like I think it's interestingly playing on those themes, and I think it's something that allows other DMs just to go there and think about it in that sense. Try and I just put here, this opens you up as experiences to take any plane. Like we mentioned about, you could make there might be more of an evil part of this, where it starts to transition into battle because it becomes lawful evil, or it becomes neutral evil, so it ends up in the Grey Waste because they start getting too greedy. Because there is someone, it says, who's becoming slightly too greedy in one of the areas, who's like holding on to too much of the good ore and asking for too much money and sort of becoming too all-powerful in their sort of small village. And so you could see that sort of shifting, and maybe it becomes like a burg that's sort of like a land burg that sort of shifts out, and it's like, could you stop that happening? I don't know. The whole alignment thing is an interesting thing to tread, and so how to tread that sensitively and well is always something to be aware of. But I think there is adventures in there, or maybe know, I don't know. It could be interesting.
No, I think you're right. Cause I know we always come to that and going, do we need alignment anymore? All this sort of thing. But I think what's so cool going through the planes as we did, like listen to all the other episodes we've done on this. I think it's so interesting because before I still put certain things together, but when I'm there, when we're reading it through, I'm like, oh, this plane is like this. How do I feel about it being good or evil as a player? And then it's up to the DM to play on that and that tropes and stuff like that. So I think 100%. If you want to mash two planes together, reading them both, obviously, that totally makes sense. Yeah. But then you're like, well, how would this plane try and influence this other plane to steal layers? I think stealing layers or taking layers is such an interesting, because it's such a power play. It's such a it's an interesting thing, because again, you could easily just have it as a normal D&D game where it's like, oh, this town has taken over these fields and it's encroaching, it's getting bigger, the influence of that. Like, you'd have it on a smaller one. Why wouldn't you have it in a more multiverse, like, planar one? So that's good.
I think what the Planescape does is, because it pushes the alignment very heavily onto the planes, it does then expose the actual greyness within the planes as well, in those alignments. And I think it does allow people to give your players an option to judge, to not judge, but like as in to make a judgment on how their character would feel about those things. So I think it pushes your character to really investigate what it means to be good and to be lawful good, and in a very extreme version of it. And so as much as I always say alignment is there as, like, I always think it's great to add more and more to your character at the beginning to help you just try and get into your player, but I'm never going to be someone that says, oh, you're not playing it neutral evil, you're not playing it this. I just think it's always there it's just a thing to aid you in, like, realizing your character and helping you communicate that in a way that is somehow a way to think. But I think there are better ways than that, like than doing that. But I think I can see why it's a useful tool, and I think this allows you to investigate it in a very interesting way.
Something I've learned very recently. I know we've got to talk about magical conditions in a second, but one thing I do want to say is that in improv, I've had a couple of lessons recently where it talks about, like, always have a strong opinion about something and be affected by it, and then they'll give you a topic, and it'll be a topic that you don't necessarily know much about. Like, for example, like I actually got the topic of architecture the other day, and I was like, okay, and I was like, well, I like some buildings, and I could go off that, but a lot of the time we started off. Lots of the people started going, I actually don't know very much about this. And obviously the whole point was being truthful, etc. I think something like this, where you get, here's how the play is, it's all about business, and it's about this, this, and this. You, as a person, will have an instant reaction going, well, I don't like that, or I find that intriguing. And I think playing true to that is very important, and having that opinion. Because you might be like, oh, I don't care, but I think most players would care when presented with something, because it will go against some other belief you have, whereas like other topics, like, if you just said, oh, it's about business, you might be like, well, I don't know much about business. But if you say, oh, it's about business because I've got this, this, and this, you're like, oh, well, I do care about that in a way. So I just think tell your players that you'll have feelings about it and act on that and have that opinion. Always have an opinion about something, and it will make for better role play.
I think that's
in general.
A very good point. Yeah.
Let's talk about magical conditions.
Okay, magic conditions. It's actually not got a lot. Really?
No, I know. It's again. I think it's interesting going from lore, which had loads and loads and loads of stuff, and now it's like magical conditions. You could do whatever you want. This is like one of the least restrictive planes as far as spell casting go, which is quite good. There's no like overarching conditions. Obviously, we talked about little bits and pieces here and there. The only real thing of note, I think, is that any elemental spells that have sort of wide-ranging effects require successful saves, etc. But even then, it's not going to really work as you intended because the plane doesn't want to be changed, which I quite like.
It wants to be very elementally neutral. I think I would say that when you're, because either it wants to be very calm or it wants to be very rugged in terms of weather conditions. So it doesn't really to do with that. So
I think it's because again it talks about in this particular chapter, it talks about like this idea that the planes, because the way they look is almost like a zip essentially, like they're being pulled apart. And there's a story about like how the rumors about whether that's the multiverse trying to pull them apart because they're slightly different, or that's where they want to be and they're trying to stick together. And I just the two layers of it is, and I think that's just really interesting that this, as a result, this elemental stuff just doesn't work because it's like it's not what the plane wills it. And I quite like that as a result. I think that's cool. Just like really cool. Yeah,
that's cool. I also like the divination thing, which is
I was just literally about to say about divination. I thought that was very sweet. Go for it.
If you want to do a clairvoyance, you have to find a reflecting pool, a reflecting surface, or a mirror, crafted on the plane. Or audience, you need to find a thicket of trees and put your ear up to a tree to hear the distant NPCs' conversations. I love that, and I think for me, the divination stuff is like any element. So it's like any element of the plane that you're on, or its product. So I like the idea that you bring out like your made in Bytopia bag, and you're pulling out something that's all stamped on with all the seals and stuff, and you use them. I thought that was quite cute. Like everything's made in, everything's local and fresh. I think I could say this on here because it'll be going out late enough that it won't be a spoiler. But I might be playing a divination wizard back in Curse of Strahd.
Ooh, exciting.
For a little bit, yeah. So but the rest of the players don't know it apart from me and the DM. I'm going to turn up one day and surprise them. But I'm thinking now, I was like, every divination, I'm just going to play my divination spirit wizard very much like when they want to cast a clairvoyance, they're going to just scoop up some water in a bowl and look into it. And if they want to listen to something, they'll go up against a tree because they're meant to be kind of a sort of kooky mage that's sort of been in the wilderness for a bit long. So I think that would be quite fun actually. So I like the inspiration I gained from that. It's got the basic good versus evil as well, necromancy thing, which is life helps, death doesn't.
Death doesn't. Yeah, pretty much. It's like duh, duh. I like that. I'll quickly say because I know we need to sort of wrap up. The D&D 5th edition optional rule is an interesting one. I think we've had something similar, but again, it's maybe a long time. So the optional rule is persuasive goodwill. So at the end of each long rest taken on this plane, a visitor that is neither lawful good or neutral good must make a DC 10 wisdom saving throw, so not particularly high. On a fail save, the creature's alignment changes that to lawful good or neutral good, whichever is closer to their current alignment. The change becomes permanent if the creature does not leave the plane with 1d4 days. Otherwise, it reverts to normal after 1 day spent on a different plane, or casting the Spellgun Evil also restores its original alignment. The idea it's permanent, that it's so infectious. It's like, isn't it wonderful? Everyone's very nice. I've worked very hard, and I sold it for what it's worth. Everything is wonderful. And you're like, oh god, no personality at all. I hate this person.
There's Fiona's character coming out there.
I guess overall, let's say it's like, this heaven of productive work, the satisfaction of a job well done. I'm just like, for me, that's like ever so slightly tinged with smugness. Like you've got your work done, you got it done in plenty of time, and you feel good about it. Whereas I'm like, every time I finish it, I'm like, thank God that's gone. Phew, right. Like I don't feel. I guess I do feel job satisfaction. I'll say that now. But at the same time, I don't think I feel that every single time. But I don't know. It's just quite an interesting, like, maybe I have too many feelings about this before this episode.
No, that's fair. That is fair. Well, okay. Well, so I think then with that we have covered the plane of Bytopia.
Yes, the Twin Paradises.
The Twin Paradises, a pastoral spin there. So now we've been here. We've done a hard day's work. We worked hard at making this, reading about it.
I feel satisfied with it.
What are we getting for the fruits of our labour? Where are we going next? What are we gaining for all that hard work?
We're going back. We're going to Gehenna, the fiery slopes of Gehenna, the plane of suspicion and greed and it's most notable for having 4 steep volcanoes and lesser volcano earthbergs drifting in the air. So it's gonna be horrible.
It's also it's got one of the
Hooray!
coolest places names, the Wandering City, the Crawling City. I'm a big
Crawling
fan
City.
of.
Yeah.
I've always wanted to do something in Gehenna. Like there's something about it. I think it's such an interesting plane. It's got such an interesting, because it's on mountainsides. It's got really interesting like gravitational pulls. It's like it's so I don't know. There's something about it that just is like the evil one, but because of all the suspicion, it feels like you could have really great campaigns in there. So I'm quite eager to get stuck into some.
Yeah, I will be completely honest. I don't know much about Gehenna. I know it's referred to quite a bit in D&D lore and stuff like that, but for me, it's always been the 9 hells of battle and all that sort of thing. So it feels like sometimes it's just like all sort of put together slightly. So obviously, I know we're coming to the end of it, so I feel like I can see bits of like Gehenna. I can see bits of the place that was on a slope, which I can't remember off the top of my head. Not Mount Celestia, not Macarnus. I'm going from my notes going.
It wasn't it one of the places in?
It wasn't Archeron.
Archeron, yeah, exactly.
No.
I think. Oh no. Yes, it was.
Matter.
I think it was.
It's on a slight slope, slightly.
Yeah.
I don't know.
But it takes a lot of influences from that. But it's the sort of like, I think the Crawling City would be a great urban setting, super evil, super urban. I'd make it very film noir, and I think it could be a really cool like neutral campaign sort of thing. I think it could be quite an interesting.
I think it sounds like it could be a cool place to like flip it. So if you were like, I don't know, Waterdeep or something, and then you flip into this place, it's almost like a mirror image.
Exactly, like a very evil,
like Baldur's Gate, etc.
Waterdeep is what I see it as. But there's very little online about it. There's very little there's no map of the Crawling City. I'm like, why is no one like? I just think it's an untapped resource that I'm excited. That I think when people hear about it, I think it'll be interesting.
Oh, well, I'm looking forward to that. But of course, until next time, you can hold back, but you can also watch any of our VODs or listen to any of our episodes of this show, the DM's Travel Book Club. It's all the links of the DM's Travel Book Club. We also have our sibling show, the DM's Book Club, where we talk about all different things. Like, obviously, we've got ones about gnomes. We've talked about quite a lot of in this, but we've got other things as well. We've talked about rangers. We've talked about Ravnica, another world setting. We've done races on that, classes, even obscure things like casting people in D&D films.
Exactly.
So if you want to have fun with that, go check that out. We're on all podcasting platforms. We're also on YouTube as well. But until next time, folks, we will see you on the fiery slopes of Gehenna. Have fun, keep safe, and we'll see you on the flip side.
See you on the flip side of this plane.
Of this plane.
Bye.